And welcome everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Opsgility Reskilling Your Organization for Microsoft Cloud webinar. We like to spend about 45 minutes to go through the content and then leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the hour for any questions from the audience. You can ask your questions at any time via the chat feature and we will make sure that they are addressed.
We'll both be tag teaming today's presentation. And my name is Scott Hogue. I'm a principal cloud solutions architect at Opsgility, and I also co-host an IT Pro focused podcast called the Microsoft Cloud IT Pro podcast. I've been working with Azure as both a developer and an IT Pro from its earliest days, and helping customers of all sizes, from some of the smallest to some of the largest, go through and do their technology implementations as they make their transitions from on-premises to the public cloud. Elizabeth and I are both really excited to have you here with us today as we talk through how reskilling your organization for the Microsoft Cloud can better prepare you as you do make these transitions to tools like Azure and Microsoft 365.
And I'm Elizabeth McAnder-Benavides. I have an extensive history in technical training and workforce development. And I have been here with Opsgility just for a short amount of time, but I am helping with supporting the government customers here for Opsgility and make sure that they help have a smooth transition to the Microsoft Cloud products. Today, we will be discussing how Opsgility can help your organization transform your IT workforce by implementing a strategic workforce development best practices, specifically the development and implementation of an enterprise learning plan. We will be doing this by showing you a case study focused on a large multinational organization that we've renamed Miles Back. In this case study, we will be highlighting how Opsgility's experts in Microsoft Cloud technology, Azure training, and human capital development help this organization transform its IT workforce during a conversion to cloud computing. Now, to get us started, over a decade ago, a phenomenon started across all technical industries in developing nations. This was called the aging of the workforce. Baby boomers were beginning to retire, and technical organizations were looking to hire equivalent replacements. But there was a problem. Generation X is significantly smaller than the baby boomer generation, and this Generation X had been blocked from many leadership positions by the generation before them, leaving industries without qualified replacements. The IT community faced this dearth of potential workforce replacements, but had a compounded issue that the fact that they were launching a transformative new technology, the cloud. Those organizations who were early adopters of the cloud had to upskill their existing workforce, place even more stress on the remaining additional IT roles that they had. And governments, think tanks, universities, and experts looked at the concurrent phenomenon and tried to come up with a solution to create a new technical workforce. And to put it simply, the solution that all of those very smart people came up with was having a strategic workforce development strategy that included having enterprise learning plans. Take it away, Scott.
So I just want to take a step back and talk about why we go to the cloud. Maybe some of you are already there today. Maybe some of you are thinking about going there. What's going on with the whole public, hybrid, private cloud thing, and really why we need to make this approach for upskilling within our organizations. Because hopefully I can sell you on the reality that if you're not going there, your competitors are, and it's allowing them to move at a much faster pace. So if we look back, historically, the IT industry has been through two major phases or eras. That first era was predominantly centered around building technology solutions. The focus was really on the technology, with each solution being individually built, operated, and maintained. Maybe you had your internal developer force go out and write a one-off application for HR or finance, and then it was deployed and you had to maintain it and operate it from there. Over time, we kind of transitioned into this second era where the focus moved beyond technology to also focus on business process or business workflows that support those technologies. So IT solutions, rather than just kind of IT sitting in the back and being just an all-up cost center, really we started to provide things as services. So hopefully we could service the business better, but we could also make ongoing investments in efficiencies within our own organizations as we went out and tried to help the business execute. With digital transformation, we're really entering a third era, this era of digitalization. So we're moving beyond automating and streamlining those business processes or workflows. What's happening is we're really entering this space where digital transformation is becoming just a big vehicle for us through which we can help our businesses innovate, and we can drive entirely new types of services that potentially we haven't had access to in the past. So if you think about a lot of the buzzwords that we have in the industry today, things like artificial intelligence or machine learning, we can certainly do some of those things on premises. But again, that stark reality is we're going to be able to do them at a scale and at a cost that's probably much lower to execute in the public cloud. So over time, what's happened is we've had this focus of IT solutions, which has shifted from a technology and a process focus to instead really focus on our core business models. And ultimately, what's the value proposition of IT back to the business? And then potentially back out to our customers as well, depending on kind of your vertical and the area you're in. And one of the things that's happening is we're seeing this shift across all industries. It'd be one thing to say, okay, it's just retail or it's just healthcare, but it's all up across the board. As Elizabeth said, she works in government services. Really, that's a huge legacy industry, and there's a huge uptick in both public and hybrid cloud on that side. So even legacy industries are shifting along at a pretty good clip. So I think for most of us, hopefully, the benefits of cloud computing have been known for many years. But just to kind of emphasize the importance of this trend, I just want to pull up some statistics from a PwC CEO survey. And the survey highlighted that the technological advances were really the number one trend that CEOs across the board believed were going to help them transform their businesses. So in this study, we're going back just a couple years to 2018. PwC found that half of all IT spend will no longer be controlled by the IT department, but it's going to be controlled by the business function of the organization. And I think for most of us, this probably aligns to where we're going and really getting into that third era of IT again, digitalization. It is here and it is upon us. More recently, Spiceworks surveyed more than 1,000 technology buyers in companies across both North America and Europe. For 2020, they found that 44% of companies will have their IT budgets rise as businesses replace outdated technology. Certainly, we've heard about some of this in the news, particularly with maybe government systems like unemployment systems, as people go out and look to replace legacy unemployment sign-up portals that are running on COBOL and 50 to 60-year-old technologies at this point. So it's certainly kind of front of mind. They also found that adoption of AI-powered technologies is expected to triple by 2021. And that adoption of edge computing is expected to double. So really a couple of things there. We're looking at an order of magnitude higher of compute that a lot of organizations are going to need access to, and they're just not going to have access to on premises. So it'd be nice if we could all just go out and maybe go into like a pay-as-you-go cloud and swipe our credit card or cut a PO with our vendor and be able to just say, okay, we're in the cloud. But the reality is adopting AI or adopting edge compute at scale is going to be a brand new skill for a lot of us. So we need to think about how either our staff or our partners can help us execute in those spaces. So really the question we have to do is just take a step back and do an honest assessment. Do we have the skills we need to be successful in the public cloud and to keep up with our competition as they're potentially driving through? And like I said, that's a good question for all of us to be able to answer honestly. Unfortunately, the answer for many of us is no. We don't have the skills that we need in-house or through those partnerships to address this shift in technology. So it ends up being a big lack of resources or just a general lack of expertise that present us with a pretty big challenge. Just to bring some more stats for you to kind of bring this front of mind, in Flexera's 2019 State of the Cloud report, 80% of the respondents said that lack of skilled resources are a challenge for their companies to migrate to the cloud or even just get started in the cloud greenfield. As this percentage has held steady year over year since the report was first commissioned in 2013, you have a lot of companies that approach learning and upskilling like us that see it as a potential opportunity to help everyone out. So companies should absolutely be examining how these migrations or implementations to the public cloud impact their workforces. Successful adoption of cloud solutions really does require a workforce that understands how to manage the complexities of that movement. Think of migration from going from on-prem up to the public cloud and all the moving pieces that are going to need to go into that. But they also need to know how to operate, support, optimize, and secure that public cloud environment once it's fully deployed. All of us need to be thinking about ways that we can identify the potential skill gaps that emerge as a result of this transition to these cloud-based services. And where required, we really need to think about how we can equip our existing staff with additional skills and knowledge to help them keep up with the ever-expanding list of technology options that are available out there for us to procure and deploy. If we look at just one more quick set of stats here, this is from the 2020's CIO Priorities Report. Also from Flexera, we begin to see how organizations are coming around to addressing what has been this consistent gap. Like I said, Flexera has been doing a lot of these surveys since 2013 or so, and they haven't really been shifting in major numbers up until about now. So roughly the same number of IT departments, around 80%, are planning on investing in upskilling their staff to deploy and support public clouds. This was likely done before the current pandemic, just kind of recognizing where we are today. So at the beginning of the year, 80% of companies were planning on reskilling for 2020. Those companies also need to plan. As Elizabeth mentioned, young professionals may or may not have the skills required to manage the migrations that you have expected or these implementations of new services. The professionals in your organization also might have advanced knowledge and skills. You might have some resources in your organizations who are really good at cloud, but can they also operate your legacy systems? Can they help you on both sides and help you make those transitions and those migrations? So ultimately, we want everybody to kind of think about taking a step back and really think about onboarding plans to address those operations of your existing systems and the new ones that you consume in the cloud. Because the reality is, as we migrate, it's okay for some stuff to stay behind. And if it stays behind, who's going to keep running it and who do we help get over that hump or hurdle to learn about public cloud? And it's just not young professionals that we need to focus on career development for. There's certainly mid-career and experienced professionals that need to stay updated with technology while also growing their soft skills that are out there. And that really brings us into why we want to talk about enterprise learning plans today, because we want to kind of take you through a path to create multi-year staff development plans to help you optimize your workforce along the way. So as Elizabeth said, we're going to walk through a study of a renamed case customer, Miles Mack, who worked with us to conduct just such an assessment. And we've laid out our recommendations for them in a formal report that we'll go ahead and cover with you here.
Thank you. And for everybody's benefit here, really what we're going to be talking about today as far as a learning plan is that we have a specific definition that we're using. On the call today, I know we have both IT professionals and IT leaders, as well as some of the human resource and learning development professionals. And really what a good enterprise learning plan is an activity that is a multi-year strategic document that includes the actions to ensure your organization has a plan to develop its workforce. It has required information involved in it about your organization's workforce pipelines, how you do your onboarding efforts, what your business goals are for the next few years, as well as any external influences that are affecting you. And it ensures your organization has a sustainable workforce with the knowledge, skills, and behaviors to expertly perform the mission. And the only way to really do this is by making sure all those professionals I mentioned a moment ago are working together. I've had a decade of experience helping to develop enterprise learning plans for different organizations, and the ones that are successful always have one thing in common, and that's the partnership within the different business units within the organization. Nobody can do this alone. No one supervisor can do this. No one HR professional can do this. It has to be a philosophy that's adopted by the organization.
All right. So now that we've introduced the ideas of strategic workforce planning and enterprise learning plan, let's go ahead and use our customer Miles Mack as a case study to illustrate some of the powerful results that can be created by using this process. So I just want to give you some background on this customer, kind of size and scale, to help you understand potentially some of the hurdles that they had to overcome. So for this particular customer, they're a multinational business. They're headquartered over in Spain, and they manufacture and sell household products. They have about 60,000 employees worldwide, and just about 30% of those workers are actually mobile. So they're effectively virtual staff for this organization. What's happened over time is, as this organization has grown, they've really adopted a three-tiered design for how they lay out operating locations. So they've got their corporate headquarters with traditional corporate campus, and that's got dozens of buildings, administrative staff, engineering, manufacturing facilities. That's really where the core of the business exists. And it's not just staff that exists there, it's also their primary data center and internet presence. So HQ has about 25,000 workers all up across it, across all those segments. So people who might be in a factory, people who might be working in a data center, human resources, finance, kind of everything across the board is there. One of the things that they've been doing, because they recognize that everything's centralized there, is IT has been trying to move away from that on-prem data center where it makes sense and get over to a cloud-inclusive infrastructure, so that as potentially cloud-based personal productivity workloads or applications need to be spun up, they can be a little bit more agile along the way. They also need to think not just about headquarters and that existing data center and all the folks that are there, but also persons that are out at their regional and hub offices. So if you've got 25,000 employees at HQ, that leaves a pretty good number sitting around the rest of the world. So in that three-tier design, they kind of look at HQ as the center ring for everything. And then they have regional hub offices that come off of that. And then there's satellite offices that come off of those regional hubs. And each one of those segments services different areas within the business, and not just leveraging different applications, but they're also going to have different needs around upskilling for thinking about the applications they support and potentially how their users access them, especially with that large mobile workforce. How did they kind of get to the point where they decided to go to the cloud? Well, their CTO kind of took a step back and looked at that on-prem footprint a few years ago and saw that things were potentially coming to end of life. Leases are coming up on both servers and software. There's legacy transitions to make potentially, not just for software like applications, but also operating systems along the way. We've got things like Windows Server 2008, 2008 R2, end of support, and for better or worse, lots of customers out there still run those workloads. So the CTO took a step back and kind of came up with a plan to hopefully over time and over a period of 7 years pretty rapidly transition to a 90-10 hybrid system where 90% of the workloads would be running in the cloud in some shape or form. Maybe that would be in infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or it could even be applications that are running inside of software as a service. So they recognized everything couldn't go to the cloud. About 10% of their workloads are going to have to remain on premises due to business desires, or things just don't run in the cloud. They still have mainframes and legacy ERP systems that are helping the business run, and they're too impactful to move, and they can't be rebuilt up in the cloud today. So they looked at this in a couple different ways. They wanted to maintain their current regional infrastructure until that infrastructure needed to be retired. That was all out there. It was a capital expenditure. It's being depreciated over time, so they wanted to keep running with that. As they could, they looked at migrating to PaaS services where it made sense as infrastructure came up and failed. So if we had a legacy on-premises SQL Server or web server, how can we get those over to the cloud? And then again, make sure that these skills exist to not only go through that motion and get that movement in place, but maintain and operate it and secure it and optimize it once it is on the other side. So now that you have a little bit of idea of what they've been taking a look at and kind of the motions they've been going through, we'll go ahead and talk through how we help them address specifically upskilling to resolve and help them reduce their on-prem footprint and gain the skills that they needed to be successful in the cloud.
Yes, and as we walk through how Opsgility helped them with this large activity of reskilling their entire IT workforce, just wanted to make sure it's clear to everybody that this work was scoped out before the current pandemic. We're going to walk through the case study as it was originally presented to the client and originally adopted by the client. But then at the end here, we're going to discuss a little bit about some of the tweaks and changes we have made based on the current pandemic. So the way that Opsgility went about supporting this client with this enterprise learning plan is by using a systematic approach. We first analyzed the situation by collecting information from multiple internal stakeholders within their organization and gained some insights and some information about what their cloud computing use and goals were. Scott just did a lovely job summarizing that. Next, we designed our plan by having the Opsgility Azure experts help us identify where the organization was currently with their staffing, and what their potential skill gaps were going to be as they converted to the cloud. Third, we helped by developing a multi-year plan targeted at Miles Vax to help them maintain a competent Microsoft computing workforce. And our recommendations aligned to their organization's strategic goals, workforce demographics, their timing, their budget, and some of their external influences that they were aware of. Then once the client reviewed the plan and gave us some feedback and we made a few tweaks, we at Opsgility helped them implement the plan by creating annual skilling plans that were easily utilized by the organization and that will be updated regularly. The last part of any good systematic plan is to have an evaluation. We at Opsgility made sure that we recommended key performance indicators to ensure the measure of the success of the implementation. That helped us then do a systematic review and a revise if necessary. And we did this with a way here to make sure that those metrics were easily available through our Skill Me Up platform that could be accessible at any time by the client and maintained. Now, this was a big, large international conglomerate organization. What we had to do with them is help the client come up with an Azure IT training transformation plan based on all of those inputs in order to be able to complete the analysis phase. When we worked with the Miles Back IT management and some of their human resource professional counterparts, we ended up developing a conversion algorithm to help them convert their current FTEs in the jobs that they currently list in their IT department, and then help them then predict where those people needed to be for the future jobs. And because of the international differences that occur with a large international conglomerate, we had to make sure that we were balancing the needs and the capabilities of the individuals along with the age and experience levels to make sure that all of the new positions had a strong distributed workforce when we were completed. Now, Miles Back chose during this plan to have what we called a moderate implementation plan. In our terminology at Opsgility, a moderate implementation plan means that they wanted a managed transition that included deadlines and learning plan assignments and customization to individuals based on where they were in their career and what they needed to support as they grow in the organization. But they were willing to pay some for support and training, as this was a very large transformation and part of a very large capital turnover for the organization. But they did have budget limits, and that they wanted to make sure that they were utilizing the cost-effective solutions as much as possible to meet their goals. Opsgility took that all into account, and we organized a plan that would optimize the use of our on-demand platform, Skill Me Up, as well as identify dedicated courses that would be taught both in person and virtually to try to reduce the cost as much as possible for this transformation. Now, one of the things here to note for a large international conglomerate is that they have different jurisdictional requirements for training and education of their staff that they need to meet, meaning that different countries have different roles. They needed to make sure that they weren't discriminating based on age, so they asked us at Opsgility to ensure that their more senior staff was also being cultivated and supported in this plan, and that we had specifically called those items out. This was of worry for their HR and legal staff at the organization. So what we did at Opsgility is that we made sure we added in very specific hands-on workshops and expert chats that were targeted more towards those mid-career and expert-level individual contributors to make sure that they were getting the support they needed as well, and there was equivalency given to the entire workforce across the globe. With these considerations, we ended up building a 3-year set of annual learning plans to help the client ensure that their workforce would be able to support the conversion and meet all of these regulatory requirements that they had, as well as meet their budget requirements. Now, here's a snapshot of what an annual learning plan looks like as part of one of our enterprise learning plan analysis. What you'll first notice here is that we have a chart organized by current job titles. In this case, the current group of over 1,000 service desk technicians that Miles Back employs. Then we organize them by their workforce demographics. We use the terms at Opsgility, young professional, mid-career, and experienced, to differentiate the relative experience the staff has. Then you'll notice that the shorthand after the demographic data is the job that they're studying to go into. In this case, AA is the architect administrator, D is for developer, etc. So now that we know the who and the what, let's discuss the how many. Miles Back wanted to distribute the workforce across the positions, like I mentioned earlier. And they wanted to make sure that the new positions are filled in a way that had an age distribution as well as an experience distribution. So the algorithm we created helped to do that. And here shows how many people from each of those categories we're going to be studying for the new positions. Now that we have the who, what, where, and how many, we needed to identify what the specific learning plan was that would be specific for that group, knowing that, as we spoke before, people with less experience would need a little bit more support and probably take a little bit more time to learn the new skills, and that some of the more experienced people that are coming in from other organizations and might already have cloud skills needed to be focusing on how to keep their skills expert level and knowing what the new changes are with the cloud as they come through. So that's why we ended up listing the learning activities as we did. And you can see the mention here in there that we actually listed when they would be going after certifications, as well as just the courses or the self-studying and hands-on activities they would be doing. And then the learning plan can be assigned. What this allowed us to do then is assign these learning plans specifically to the employees that were identified. And then we could track it through our Skill Me Up platform, allowing the management of MilesVac the opportunity here to see who is working towards their goals. And then as we help them with their systematic reviews, identify when they were on task and when they were off task for meeting their 3-year goal for a complete cloud transformation.
All right, so once we have a plan, what are the next steps? For MilesVac, IT leadership worked with one of our training account specialists who are dedicated to that account to go ahead and review that plan. We did make a couple small adjustments and then work towards final approval with them. Once they approved it, we then worked with IT leadership to add the training element to their transformation budget and go ahead and make sure that we were in place to offer all the services that were identified. By having a 3-year enterprise learning plan that tied directly to the organization's strategic goals, they were able to gain pre-approval for a budget for all 3 years from their CEO and CFO. We then worked with IT management and helped them to identify which of their staff would be assigned to each one of these cohorts as we began to drive people through that transformation. That identification happens in a number of ways. Sometimes supervisors step in and they just assign people. They kind of pick a new role and say, you shall go here. In other cases, they're a little bit more receptive. And as that workforce is transforming, they're getting opportunities potentially at that individual contributor level to indicate their interest in which direction they want to go. In either way, we kind of step in and help support and help them set up their learning plans on Skill Me Up so that they can start assigning learning paths to each one of those individuals, so that not only top level management has insight into organizationally how the overall business is adapting to this new style of learning and these new technologies, but also at the management level, they can drive everything through as they need to and understand where their resources are at. We also meet with this customer monthly to just review metrics and adjust any training schedules as needed. So if we had 4 instances of a particular class scheduled, but only 3 could be done because there was some movement or launch of a new product within the business, we go ahead and adjust that accordingly. Or on the flip side, we'll go ahead and offer more as well where it makes sense. As Elizabeth mentioned, all of this work was originally completed before the pandemic. And I think most of us have seen some shifts in our business and coronavirus affecting not just our overall business and how we interact with customers, but also things like our IT projects and our IT budgets along the way. And this customer is really no different. So IT leadership has come back and tried to figure out not only how they're going to amend those budgets and their business plans, but potentially how these impact some of these multi-year plans that we've been working on with them. We recognize that things happen, and we've certainly had clients postpone, cancel, or like in this case, a miles back, go ahead and refocus their plans as the pandemic began to take shape in Europe and across the world with that multinational workforce. Just to kind of give you a sense for how we had to pivot and rethink some things, we were about 4 months into our implementation before the world kind of changed right underneath us and right underneath this customer. During that time, we had enrolled about 3,000 people into Skill Me Up, which is our on-demand learning platform where everybody goes and sits for CBTs, assessments, and goes through hands-on labs. We had also conducted on the order of about 60 dedicated courses for the IT staff, just to get them through things like cloud fundamentals and make sure we were going out across the org and making sure everyone was grounded in the same ways on terminology and really where the organization was going from a business perspective. So originally, a lot more of those were intended to be in person, but we've gone ahead and flipped those over to virtual deliveries, which potentially gives us a little bit more flexibility in the times we can offer them and things like that as well. We also did spend some time with IT leadership and not just go through technology training, but also business value training and IT leadership and decision maker training, specifically in context of migrating to the cloud. So as their resources are making this transition and they're upskilling along the way, we wanted to make sure that IT leadership was positioned to support them and understood why they might be going down some of the paths they were. So if we can remove those barriers and hesitancies to technology from leadership all the way down to individual contributors at the bottom, it just helps everything move a little bit smoother. Even with some of these cuts in budgets and transitions, they still need to meet the same IT transformation goals this year. And that's kind of something that's hard to do when you have to reduce a bunch of discretionary spending. So Elizabeth mentioned we kind of had them in this middle or moderate model. So we're transitioning them into what we call our nimble model. So this includes rolling back the number of live instructor courses to focus more on CBTs through the Skill Me Up platform through the end of this year. So students continue to go through the same learnings. They just might not have as much hands-on instructor touch along the way, but they can still pick up the core knowledge that they need to. Ultimately, this customer still does believe that the dedicated modality is the right model for their organization, just to make sure that they have alignment on change management issues and they can complete training on their timeline. So they do intend to return to their original plan at some point. And hopefully that's this year. If not, that's sometime in kind of year 2 of what was their 3-year plan.
Wonderful. So the Miles Back case study was a great example for what an enterprise learning plan can do for an organization. And with the pandemic, it helps to show how they can be updated based on external factors and internal metric measurement. But there's just a couple other things that were not really highlighted well in this case study that I'm going to highlight for you now, just to show you that an enterprise learning plan can be used for both small organizations as well as large organizations like Miles Back. They can be used for other scenarios other than what Miles Back specifically was doing, and just kind of give you a little bit more flavor without giving you multiple new case studies. So one of the things here that I would like just to make sure that we highlight is just to refresh everybody on what the standard Microsoft certification pathway is. What you can see here is that the Microsoft certification pathway assumes that everyone taking the classes already has an IT background, or in some places already has a cloud computing background. Thus, they believe that you go right into your advanced certifications, into your job focus. That's very heavy and biased on the concept here other than the Azure certification exams, there's not much else to learn, and that you would have at least a minimum of 6 months of hands-on experience before you go to take that test. Those kind of assumptions are sometimes hard to fill. As you're hiring new staff or as you're moving people around in an organization with current staff, they might not have an IT degree or they might not have the opportunity to have hands-on experience for 6 months before you have to move them over to be qualified to work on your new production system. So just a couple of things here to kind of think through. Additionally, you've got to think through a little bit here about what, if you see all the benefits of a learning plan, one of the big things is knowing that all individuals do not have the same background or experience. So when we're upskilling them, we need to really look at learning plans that align to their skills and abilities. And I can personally attest to this. I've seen organizations try to put in a one-size-fits-all learning plan for their staff, and there's always pushback. Either it's not enough time for people who are new to the topic and need to learn it for the first time, or it's too much and you're wasting the time of your experienced staff. And so taking just a little bit of time here in your strategic systematic approach to ensure you've got the right plan for the right people can really reduce a lot of heartache when it comes to management and the HR professionals who have to usually organize these activities. So in order to do that, you have to take a step back and really, take a look at how do you recruit your new staff? Are they coming from a high school? Are they coming from a university? Are they from the military? And then think through a little bit about how formal your organization's onboarding process is. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but if you have a very organized onboarding process with procedures and mentors and sign-off sheets, or are you more of a let them learn on the job and let them shadow? Either one's right or wrong, but both can affect how you put together an effective learning plan and how fast somebody can move through these steps to becoming qualified. Then you really need to know what position it is you've hired them into and what they're going to be filling. That's basic common sense, and, make sure that they're aligned with what job it is that you're hoping they fill for your organization. And once you gather all those inputs, we can really develop a learning plan that's more effective to that person or to a cohort than just a one-size-fits-all. As the next slide shows as an example here, this is a diagram for an AZ-104 Azure administrator. Obviously, it's a little different than the standard Microsoft one we saw previously. And as you work into your thought process, what the experience level is of the individual, and the different ways that you onboard them and support them, you can really find a way here to make sure that they make it to the top of the stairway and to be productive. This is always a logical pathway. This isn't, brain surgery or rocket science that we're talking about here, but it's pretty apparent that high school graduates will likely have a bigger gap in knowledge and skills than their mid-career hires from another company. And we can help them by providing the right training resources and timeline, and then making sure we're budgeting and identifying the correct learning styles for that cohort that will help them be successful and more productive faster, which is really the goal for organizational development leaders and training at organizations, is to get people to be able to do their jobs safely, securely, and productively as quickly as possible. And so when Opsgility training specialist, we're all trained to do this, and we can help facilitate these discussions and develop cohorts through learning plans by keeping our metrics and helping send reminders and make recommendations directly to the learners. We can actually help assist and partner with our companies that are our partners to help them with their employees. So that way their employees are not only understanding the fact that they have a learning plan that has been assigned to them, but actually are achieving it. We at Opsgility have had training specialists for a number of years, and this is one of our unique services that many of our companies don't take advantage of. And that in this case, Miles Back finally realized that we're here to help and to make sure that not only that you buy some sort of service from us, but we're here to help, encourage your staff to actually utilize it to the fullest extent. And so we have found in other cases, because the miles back case study specifically is too new, that when organizations take full advantage of their training specialists from Opsgility, the employees of that company were 92% likely to pass their Microsoft certification exam on their first try. And this is because, we are focused wholly on making sure that people are working their way through the plan, making their way through the certification activities, and are prepared and ready to take that certification when they finish their learning plan. So, as we come here to the end and get close here to the, time to ask questions from the audience, I just want to say thank you to everybody here for attending our webinar. Just a couple of reminders here. As you think about Opsgility and stuff, we have a very large portfolio of training and systems available to help you. We have our dedicated courses that you can learn more about at opsgility.com and our on-demand courses at Skill Me Up. And then at Opsgility, we make certification preparation easy with multiple paths for the students, including instructor-led and on-demand training in Azure and Microsoft 365. We can even help you order and manage your certification vouchers for your teams, and making it easy to purchase vouchers in bulk and distribute them so that they can complete their learning path, so that you don't have to go back every single time one of your employees says they're ready. We also offer some very unique hands-on lab platforms in addition to our on-demand and instructor-led training. This platform allows you to experience Azure as a sandbox environment with step-by-step lab guides that reinforce your learners what they've learned in their classes. And that lab progress is also tracked, which is an exciting thing here, so they can see not only where they made it through the theoretical content, but also where they've made it through the hands-on content. We really do appreciate you being with us here today. Just to recap, what we covered was what the benefits of adopting the public cloud were, what the overview of an enterprise learning plan is, gave you hopefully here a really strong benchmarking case study from the miles back example, showed you how Opsgility could help with our training account specialist, talked about from the customer's viewpoint what their next steps were once they received an enterprise learning plan, and then gave you a few more details about the thought process that goes behind learning plans to see that they can be applied to any organization, large or small. And with that, what I really like to say here is that we are now very much open to questions, and are happy to help you with anything that we can. And just hopefully, since most of you are on the call here today are already current customers with us at Opsgility, just so you know that this is a option that you already have at your fingertips that would be more than happy to discuss with you. Just letting you know that here, that this is definitely something here we want to start providing more often and make sure people understand it's a resource to them. And with that, Scott, do you want to start facilitating the questions?
Yeah, I'd love to. One question out there is, how do we message around making certain trainings mandatory without sounding too heavy-handed? For me personally, I think lots of us, we tend to sit back maybe from the IT leadership side or from the managerial side. And certifications are a great way to go for folks. Like we see a lot of our customers come in and say, let's do cloud fundamentals or administrator, developer, or architect training, whatever it is. But they focus on, you must get the certification. You have 3 months to go and get this, or else your job is going away, or whatever it happens to be. I'm not a fan of approaching things that way. The certification really, it's a two-way street. So from an organizational perspective, it's proving that your folks are gaining the skills that they need, and that they're all running off the same dictionary and thesaurus as they're going out and communicating with the organization. And you can kind of ensure they're making the right steps. I would tend to message mandatory certifications or mandatory trainings with an organization as more of a reward. So if you do this, here's the things that are going to happen. That could be as simple as saying, hey, did you know you get a badge when you get this done? And if enough of you get a badge, we get to have a virtual happy hour on Skype or Teams or Zoom, or whatever it is we're doing today, kind of in current timing. We also have over time kind of transitioned our platform a little bit. to see where we can hand out some more of those nice to haves along the way. So for something like, say, Azure Administrator training, so the AZ 104, what we'll do as part of our learning path is we'll do challenge-based assessments directly within the learning path. So effectively real-time hands-on labs without step-by-step guides, but that they also issue badges along the way as well, so that attendees or students are getting something to keep them interested and keep them engaged as they're going ahead and executing on that plan. I think the other thing that you have to do, and I find that I have to push back with customers on this sometimes, is you have to be realistic about the timelines for implementation for some of these things. So if I look at the Azure Administrator, Azure Developer training, Microsoft says that you should have 6 months of hands-on experience with the platform before you go and sit that exam. So we can't take somebody, I mean, we could, but it's not a great way to do it. You really shouldn't be taking somebody and saying, okay, let's put you through this 5-day course. And at the end of 5 days, you knew nothing about Azure, and now you're an expert in it, and you can go pass and be an administrator or developer. It's just not a great way to do it. We can do the brain dumps and things like that, but there's no retention or muscle memory that's built along the way there. And ultimately, the goal isn't really to get your people certified. It might be a tangential goal, but the real goal is to get them to the point where they're hands-on with technology enough and they understand the space and the services and resources they interact with, to a point where they can operate and optimize your environments in an ongoing way. So it's kind of both, right? We want students or attendees to be engaged and rewarded as they go through. And we want to make sure that organizationally, you're all positioned in a way where you can be realistic about what you're asking of the organization that's underneath you. We also had a couple questions about sharing the slides. I don't believe the slides for this one are going to be shared, but the recording certainly will be. So this recording will be posted to YouTube probably within the next few days, if not by early next week at the latest. It'll go up there, and that'll just be on our Opsgility channel up on YouTube.
Yes, in addition to that, if anybody on the call here specifically would like someone to reach out to them to discuss the contents, if you just put your name in the chat feature, we'll have one of our training account specialists reach out to you and make sure specifically that you get a copy of the link to the recording as soon as it is available on the YouTube site. Are there any other questions from the audience?
Well, thanks again for those of you that attended today. If you don't have any other questions, feel free to hop off. Elizabeth and I will stay on for a few more minutes and answer any remaining questions that are out there.
And thank you all for asking questions and being engaged. It always makes these things so much better. Oh, and I see Michael here. Can I unmute or better type the question? Scott, I believe we have them.
I believe you have to type the question.
Okay.
At least in the go to training thing.
I was just making sure here that I wasn't missing
a
match
button. Go to webinar rather. Webinars are a little bit different than trainings. We try and be way more interactive when we do virtual deliveries with students and breakout rooms and things like that. This is a little bit more structured. So for the link to the recording, just to repeat it again, that'll be going on YouTube, just on Opsgility's YouTube channel. So if you just go to YouTube and search for Opsgility, you'll land on our channel right there. This webinar will be posted there, and you'll also see all the webinars we've done over the past couple months, which might be interesting to you as well. We've done a couple on certification, some on cost management, and a couple of other things. So another question in the chat was, outside of the technical certifications, what else can organizations do or focus on to support a culture of digital transformation? I think there's a couple other things that you can do there. Certainly you have to focus on the technologies that you're going to implement. I see a lot of the larger customers that I work with that are really successful at it. They focus on the human side of change. So they have dedicated departments or programs within their organizations to specifically focus on organizational change management. So whether they do ProSci or some other type of model to communicate those changes out there. So yeah, I think you do have to come up with a plan to prepare the organization, not just for the training component, but certainly as my things shift, what does that look like? How long is it going to take? And being honest with the business along the way. Like we spend a lot of time working on cost management and optimization with customers from like my end, from the architecture side, because you go to the cloud and all of a sudden it's more expensive and you haven't surfaced that cost back to the business. So it's a great opportunity to kind of get everybody in line with more of that front and center data that needs to be out there. So for example, if I take you from an on-prem web server and you were being charged $50 a month by the organization for it, like maybe they were doing chargeback or showback already, when you go to something like Azure, that might actually cost you $70 a month. And it's not really that it's more expensive, it's just that you potentially haven't accounted for the TCO on premises all up. So what was the actual cost for HVAC? What was the cost for electricity? What was the cost for human time? Like for somebody at MilesVac to walk around that on-prem cavernous data center with a temperature gun in their hands so that they could measure temperature on the back of the racks. When you add all that up, it tends to be very similar. And then we can give you better kind of component costs on the other side. Let's see. So all of this information today we presented was on Azure. Are there similar possibilities with other cloud platforms? Absolutely. It depends on potentially organizationally how you want to change it. We just find that naturally a lot of our customers come to us for Microsoft expertise, but we also do AWS and GCP and a couple other clouds as well. Like we do private clouds with VMware implementations, and certainly we have customers who do like OpenShift or things like that on-prem as well that we help out. You have to figure out how you're organizationally going to align there. Lots of Microsoft customers do align to the certifications because there's so many of them out there. AWS, it's probably a 50-50 mix for whether you actually align to certifications or you just say, hey, here's the things we're going to implement and figure out what needs to happen along the way to become competent in those. And GCP is really hit or miss. It's kind of it's not so much of a moving target, but it's a slower platform. At least from my side, lots of the organizations that I work with, like if they're multi-cloud, they're really viewing it as a two-cloud game. It's Microsoft and Amazon, and then maybe their private cloud back on-prem. But GCP we don't see a lot of. But there certainly are opportunities to come up with plans around those as well. And then
I'll just add.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll just add to that just a little bit is for one of the other partners that we have here at Opsgility, we developed an enterprise learning plan that wasn't Azure based, so it's totally possible. We actually looked at, in that case, a Microsoft 365 transformation for that organization. Now, with the pandemic, a lot of companies did that on their own without any plans in the last 7 weeks, but we did have one of those before the pandemic hit that we helped with that was then escalated quickly as it became more necessary than the 18-month plan that they originally had.
Another question in the chat was certifications and technical questions are a big part of it, but not all of it. And yes, absolutely. There have to be business drivers to get you over to the other side. And I think there's value for everyone, even if you're a non-technical resource, in at least exploring either fundamentals training, so something that can get you to the point where when I say public cloud versus community cloud, you can understand the differences between those two things. Or when we talk about CapEx and OpEx, specifically in the context of cloud, what's going on there? What does elasticity and scale mean? A lot of that terminology is the same across every cloud provider and every public cloud that exists out there today. So I think there's value in going through fundamentals training. And then if you're not technical, I also think there's value in not only understanding that fundamental terminology, but also understanding and potentially going through something like we do custom trainings that like we do migration for technical decision makers, and then we do migration for business decision makers. So we want everybody to understand not only the technological spread of things they're going to implement, but also the business drivers to get you over to the other side. We'll go ahead and do one last question here. So as you look at multi-clouds like Office 365, do you look at multi-clouds like Office 365, ServiceNow, Box, Azure, etc.? We do. We tend to focus on